Second part of Missing, page 13, by Anna Catherine Green. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Darvinia. Missing, page 13, by Anna Catherine Green. Part 3. Miss Strange, thus appealed to, asked where the gentlemen were now. She was told that they were still all together in the library. The ladies had been sent home. "Then let us go to them," said Violet, hiding under a smile her great fear that here was an affair which might very easily spell for her that dismal word, failure. So great was that fear that under all ordinary circumstances she would have had no thought for anything else in the short interim between this stating of the problem and her speedy entrance among the persons involved. But the circumstances of this case were so far from ordinary, or rather, let me put it this way, the setting of the case was so very extraordinary that she scarcely thought of the problem before her, in her great interest in the house through whose rambling halls she was being so carefully guided. So much that was tragic and heartrending had occurred here. The Van Brooklyn name, the Van Brooklyn history, above all the Van Brooklyn tradition, which made the house unique in the country's annals, all made an appeal to her imagination, and centered her thoughts on what she saw about her. There was a door which no man ever opened, had never opened since Revolutionary times. Should she see it? Should she know it, if she did see it? Then Mr. Van Brooklyn himself, just to meet him under any conditions and in any place, was an event. But to meet him here, under the pall of his own mystery. No wonder she had no words for her companions, or that her thoughts clung to this anticipation in wonder and almost fearsome delight. His story was a well-known one. A bachelor and a misanthrope, he lived absolutely alone, save for a large entourage of servants, all men and elderly ones at that. He never visited, though he now and then, as on this occasion, entertained certain persons under his roof. He declined every invitation for himself, avoiding even, with equal strictness, all evening amusements of whatever kind, which would detain him in the city after 10 at night. Perhaps this was to ensure no break in his rule of life, never to sleep out of his own bed. Though he was a man well over 50, he had not spent, according to his own statement, but 2 nights out of his own bed since his return from Europe in early boyhood, and those were in obedience to a judicial summons which took him to Boston. This was his main eccentricity, but he had another which is apparent enough from what has already been said. He avoided women. If thrown in with them during his short visits into town, he was invariably polite and at all times companionable, but he never sought them out, nor had gossip, contrary to its usual habit, ever linked his name with one of the sex. Yet he was a man of more than ordinary attraction. His features were fine and his figure impressive. He might have been the cynosure of all eyes had he chosen to enter crowded drawing-rooms, or even to frequent public assemblages. But having turned his back upon everything of the kind in his youth, he had found it impossible to alter his habits with advancing years. Nor was he now expected to. The position he had taken was respected. Leonard Van Brooklyn was no longer criticized. Was there any explanation for this strangely self-centered life? Those who knew him best seemed to think so. In the first place, he had sprung from an unfortunate stock. Events of an unusual and tragic nature had marked the family of both parents. Nor had his parents themselves been exempt from this seeming fatality. Antagonistic in tastes and temperament, they had dragged on an unhappy existence in the old home, till both natures rebelled, and a separation ensued, which not only disunited their lives, but sent them to opposite sides of the globe, never to return again. At least, that was the inference drawn from the peculiar circumstances attending the event. On the morning of one never-to-be-forgotten day, John Van Brooklyn, the grandfather of the present representative of the family, found the following note from his son lying on the library table. Father, life in this house or any house with her is no longer endurable. One of us must go. The mother should not be separated from her child. Therefore it is I whom you will never see again. Forget me, but be considerate of her and the boy. William. 6 hours later, another note was found, this time from the wife. Father, tied to a rotting corpse, what does one do? Lop off one's arm, if necessary, to rid one of the contact. As all love between your son and myself is dead, I can no longer live within the sound of his voice. As this is his home, he is the one to remain in it. May our child reap the benefit of his mother's loss and his father's affection. Rhoda. Both were gone, and gone forever. Simultaneous in their departure, they preserved each his own silence, and sent no word back. If the one went east and the other west, they may have met on the other side of the globe, but never again in the home which sheltered their boy. For him and for his grandfather, they had sunk from sight in the great sea of humanity, leaving them stranded on an isolated and mournful shore. The grandfather steeled himself to the double loss for the child's sake, but the boy of 11 succumbed. Few of the world's great sufferers, of whatever age or condition, have mourned as this child mourned, or shown the effects of his grief so deeply or so long. Not till he had passed his majority did the line, carved in one day in his baby forehead, lose any of its intensity. And there are those who declare that even later than that, the midnight stillness of the house was disturbed from time to time by his muffled shriek of "Mother! Mother!" sending the servants from the house, and adding one more horror to the many which clung about this accursed mansion. Of this cry Violet had heard, and it was that and the door. But I have already told you about the door which she was still looking for, when her two companions suddenly halted, and she found herself on the threshold of the library, in full view of Mr. Van Brooklyn and his two guests. Slight and fairy-like in figure, with an air of modest reserve more in keeping with her youth and dainty dimpling beauty than with her errand, her appearance produced an astonishment which none of the gentlemen were able to disguise. This the clever detective with a genius for social problems and odd elusive cases? This darling of the ballroom in satin and pearls? Mr. Spielhagen glanced at Mr. Cornell, and Mr. Cornell at Mr. Spielhagen, and both at Mr. Upjohn, in very evident distrust. As for Violet, she had eyes only for Mr. Van Brooklyn, who stood before her in a surprise equal to that of the others, but with more restraint in its expression. She was not disappointed in him. She had expected to see a man reserved almost to the point of austerity, and she found his first look even more awe-compelling than her imagination had pictured. So much so, indeed, that her resolution faltered, and she took a quick step backward, which seeing, he smiled, and her heart and hopes grew warm again. That he could smile, and smile with absolute sweetness, was her great comfort when later... But I am introducing you too hurriedly to the catastrophe. There is much to be told first. I pass over the preliminaries, and come at once to the moment when Violet, having listened to a repetition of the full facts, stood with downcast eyes before these gentlemen, complaining in some alarm to herself, "They expect me to tell them now, and without further search or parley, just where this missing page is. I shall have to balk that expectation without losing their confidence. But how?" Summoning up her courage, and meeting each inquiring eye with a look which seemed to carry a different message to each, she remarked very quietly, "This is not a matter to guess at. I must have time, and I must look a little deeper into the facts just given me. I presume that the table I see over there is the one upon which Mr. Upjohn laid the manuscript during Mr. Spielhagen's unconsciousness." All nodded.